Sir, I said step outside. You're trespassing. Now,
I paid for my food. I'm not leaving. This is a mistake.
when the manager says go, you go. Don't argue with me.
You're escalating
Check
this
the
for
facts.
no reason.
Turn around. Last warning.
I am not resisting.
You're about to ruin your career.
Officer Derek Vance had been patrolling the streets of Norfolk for 6 years, viewing every interaction as a potential battlefield, but he had no idea that the man standing calmly before him, hands raised in a non-threatening manner, wasn't just a local barbecue enthusiast. He was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thorne, a 22-year veteran of the United States Navy, a man who had led engineering divisions through 3 combat deployments and whose uniform, currently hanging in a dry cleaning bag in his truck, bore the weight of more ribbons than Vance had years on this earth. It was a Tuesday afternoon, specifically 12:15 p.m., when the career of Officer Vance collided with the unshakable discipline of Chief Thorne. Thorne, at 45 years old, carried himself with the quiet, imposing gravity of a man who had nothing left to prove. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a graying goatee that was trimmed to regulation perfection. He stood near the pickup counter of Sullivan's Smokehouse, a popular lunch spot known for its brisket and long lines. He wasn't causing a scene. He wasn't shouting. He was checking emails on his phone, waiting for a catering order meant for his sailors back at the base. Thorne had joined the Navy at 18, seeking a way out of a neighborhood that promised little more than struggle. Over 2 decades, he had ascended the ranks through sheer competence and an unwillingness to cut corners. As a chief, he was the backbone of the fleet. "Ask the chief" wasn't just a saying, it was the operational doctrine of his ship. He was responsible for the lives, training, and morale of 45 young sailors. He was a man who valued order, respect, and procedure above all else. That afternoon, he was off duty, but on a mission of morale, picking up $300 worth of barbecue for his division after they had passed a grueling inspection. He wore a simple navy blue polo shirt and khaki cargo pants attire that was practical and neat, yet to the untrained eye, he was just a large black man taking up space. To Officer Vance and to the manager who had summoned him, Thorne's resume didn't matter. His service didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was a perception rooted in bias, a perception that saw a threat where there was only a customer. This incident would cost the city millions, but more importantly, it would expose the fragile nature of freedom for those who fight hardest to protect it. Before we dive deeper into the investigation, where are you tuning in from? If you believe veterans deserve unconditional respect, hit that like button. Your engagement helps us share these necessary stories. Sullivan's Smokehouse was the kind of establishment that prided itself on rustic charm, reclaimed wood walls, the smell of hickory smoke in the air, and a clientele that usually consisted of downtown office workers and tourists. The lunch rush was chaotic. The noise level was high. Amidst the sea of suits and business casual attire, Marcus Thorne stood like a lighthouse, stationary and patient. He had arrived at 11:55 a.m., placed his large order and paid with his personal credit card. The cashier had told him it would be 20 minutes. Thorne nodded, stepped to the side, and waited. However, the ecosystem of Sullivan's Smokehouse was controlled by Brad Gorski. At 38 years old, Gorski was the general manager, a man who curated the restaurant's image with an obsessive and often exclusionary eye. He had been managing the place for 3 years and had a reputation among the staff for being high-strung and quick to judge. He preferred a certain flow to the dining room, and he disliked anyone who disrupted his visual of a bustling, upscale lunch crowd. From his vantage point near the kitchen pass, Gorski spotted Thorne. He didn't see a paying customer waiting for a large order. He saw a large man standing near the pickup area, not moving, checking a phone, and looking intimidating. Gorski watched Thorne for 5 minutes. In his mind, narratives began to form without evidence. Was he a delivery driver demanding priority? Was he someone who wandered in off the street to use the air conditioning? Gorski had recently read an article about aggressive panhandling in the downtown district. Despite Thorne's clean clothes and calm demeanor, Gorski's bias filled in the blanks. He walked over to the hostess stand. "Who is that guy?" he whispered, gesturing discreetly. The hostess, a young college student, looked up. "I think he's waiting for the catering order, the brisket platter." Gorski frowned. "He's been standing there staring at people. He's making the customers nervous." This was a fabrication. No customer had complained. No one had even glanced at Thorne, who was engrossed in an email about a pump repair schedule. But Gorski convinced himself that Thorne's presence was a liability. He walked past Thorne, expecting the man to move or acknowledge him. Thorne, focused on his phone, didn't notice the manager. Gorski took this as an affront. He went back to his office and made a decision that would end his career in the hospitality industry. He picked up the phone and dialed the police non-emergency line, escalating a non-event into a crisis. "I have a situation at Sullivan's," Gorski told the dispatcher. "There's a man here refusing to leave. He's loitering near the counter, and he's becoming aggressive with my staff." "Is he armed? Is he physically violent?" the dispatcher asked. "I don't know if he's armed," Gorski said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But he's big and he's scaring people. I asked him to wait outside and he refused." That was a lie. Gorski had never spoken a word to Thorne. "I need an officer to remove him." The call was logged. The die was cast. Do you think business managers should be held personally liable for filing false police reports? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Officer Derek Vance received the dispatch at 12:08 p.m. Vance was 29 years old, a 6-year veteran of the force who had spent most of his career on patrol. He was known in the precinct for his high arrest numbers, but also for a troubling amount of use-of-force reports. His file contained 4 civilian complaints in the last 3 years, 2 for rudeness, 2 for excessive force. Internal Affairs had cleared him each time, citing insufficient evidence, but the reputation stuck among his peers. Vance was the type of officer who believed that command presence meant absolute domination of a scene. He didn't de-escalate, he overpowered. When the call came in, "Subject refusing to leave, possibly aggressive," Vance's adrenaline spiked. He pictured a chaotic scene, a belligerent drunk, or a violent vagrant. He didn't picture a Navy chief. He parked his cruiser in the loading zone, out front lights flashing, announcing his arrival with authority. He adjusted his utility belt, checked his body camera, which was recording, and marched into the restaurant. The smell of barbecue sauce and the hum of conversation hit him, but his eyes were scanning for the threat. Gorski, the manager, met him at the door immediately. "Over there," Gorski pointed, not bothering to lower his voice. "The guy in the blue shirt. He's been standing there for 20 minutes. He won't leave." Vance looked. He saw Thorne. He saw a black man, broad and tall, looking at a phone. Vance didn't see a weapon. He didn't see anyone cowering in fear. But he had the manager's word, and in Vance's experience, the manager was the complainant and the black man was the suspect. It was a formula he had applied dozens of times. He bypassed the hostess stand and walked straight toward the pickup counter, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. Thorne looked up only when Vance was 3 feet away. The chief's situational awareness, honed by years of watchstanding, alerted him to the intrusion. He saw the uniform, the badge, and the aggressive stance. Thorne lowered his phone, his expression neutral. He expected the officer was there for lunch. "Officer?" Thorne nodded respectfully, a reflex of his service. Vance didn't return the nod. He stopped 2 feet from Thorne, invading his personal space. "We need to talk outside. Now." Thorne blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "You heard me. The manager wants you gone. You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" Thorne's brow furrowed. "Officer, I think there's a misunderstanding. I ordered food. I'm waiting for—" "I don't care what you're waiting for." Vance cut him off, his voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby diners. "When the manager says go, you go. This is private property." Thorne held his ground, his feet planted shoulder-width apart. He shifted into the calm, authoritative voice he used when addressing junior sailors who had made a mistake. "Officer, I paid $300 for a catering order. I have the receipt right here in my pocket. I am not trespassing. I am a customer. Vance stepped closer. The idea that this suspect was arguing with him, correcting him, ignited his temper. He interpreted Thorne's calmness not as discipline, but as arrogance. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Leave, or I will remove you. Thorne took a slow breath. He knew exactly what was happening. He had given 22 years of his life to the Constitution. Yet here he was being treated like a criminal because a manager didn't like his silhouette. I'm not leaving without my food or a refund, Thorne stated clearly. And I would suggest you lower your voice and check the facts before you make a mistake. Is that a threat? Vance snapped. It's a fact, Thorne replied. I am a chief petty officer in the United States Navy. I am not a vagrant. I am not causing a disturbance. Vance laughed a short, derisive sound. Yeah, and I'm the admiral. Let me see some ID. Thorne reached slowly toward his back pocket. Don't reach! Vance shouted, his hand dropping to his taser. The restaurant went silent. Forks froze midair. I am reaching for my wallet, Thorne said, narrating his movements slowly. To show you my identification. Thorne pulled out his wallet and extracted his military ID, the Common Access Card CAC with the gold chip. He held it out. Active duty. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thorne. Vance barely glanced at it. His confirmation bias was now a concrete wall. He saw a card, but his mind rejected the validity. He had decided this man was a liar. That looks fake as hell, Vance scoffed. You can buy those online. Stolen valor is a crime, buddy. Impersonating military personnel to get sympathy. That's a new low. The accusation hit Thorne harder than a physical blow. Stolen valor. The concept sickened him. He had lost friends in the Persian Gulf. He had missed his daughter's birth while deployed. To have this young officer, who likely had never left the state, accuse him of faking his service was an insult that burned. Officer. Thorne's voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. You are making a grave error. Look at the chip. Call your supervisor. Do not do this. Turn around, Vance barked, grabbing Thorne's wrist. You're under arrest. For what? Someone in the crowd shouted. A middle-aged woman at a nearby table had her phone out. He showed you his ID. He's just waiting for food. Vance ignored the crowd. He spun Thorne around. Thorne had a choice: resist and risk being tased or shot, or comply and win the war later. The chief chose the latter. He allowed his arm to be twisted behind his back. I am complying, Thorne announced loud enough for the cameras. I am not resisting. I am Chief Petty Officer Thorne. This officer is arresting me without cause. Vance slammed the handcuffs onto Thorne's wrists, tightening them aggressively. You're under arrest for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and let's add resisting arrest since you want to run your mouth. Vance shoved Thorne toward the door. The shame of being marched out in handcuffs past the staring eyes of the lunch crowd was intense, but Thorne held his head high. He walked with dignity while Vance pushed and prodded him as if he were a dangerous animal. Outside, the bright afternoon sun illuminated the spectacle. Gorski stood by the window, arms crossed, looking satisfied. He had cleaned up his restaurant. He had no idea he had just destroyed his own life. Get in the car, Vance ordered, pushing Thorne's head down unnecessarily as he shoved him into the back of the patrol unit. You want to play soldier? You can play it in a cell. Thorne shifted in the cramped back seat, the handcuffs biting into his wrists. He looked at Vance through the plexiglass divider. My ID is in my wallet. My receipt is in my pocket. You have refused to verify both. I want your badge number and your sergeant's name. You'll get nothing, Vance sneered, putting the car in gear. You're going to booking John Doe. Why do some officers escalate situations instead of verifying information? Comment your opinion below. The drive to the 2nd precinct took 15 minutes. Thorne used that time to compartmentalize his anger. He went into operational mode. He memorized the time, the route, the officer's erratic driving, and the specific insults used. He prepared his statement. He knew that the moment he arrived at the station, the dynamic would shift. The police department had a relationship with the naval base. There were protocols. They arrived at the precinct. Vance pulled Thorne out of the car and marched him into the processing area. The intake room was busy. Behind the high desk sat Desk Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 54 years old, a gray-haired veteran of the force with 30 years on the job. Before he was a cop, he had been a sergeant in the Army Rangers. He knew a soldier when he saw one. He knew the bearing, the look, the silence. When Vance walked in pushing a handcuffed black man who stood with perfect posture and stared straight ahead, Miller's radar went off. "What do we have, Vance?" Miller asked, looking over his glasses. "Trespassing at Sullivan's BBQ, disorderly. Refused to leave. Claimed to be military, flashed some fake ID." Vance tossed Thorne's wallet onto the high counter. "Guy's a piece of work. Accused me of not doing my job." Miller looked at Thorne. "Name?" "Thorne. Marcus. Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy. Service number ending in 4922. Thorne rattled it off with the cadence of a man who had said it 1,000 times. Miller froze. He looked at Vance, then reached for the wallet. He opened it and pulled out the CAC card. He held it up to the light, checking the hologram, the chip, the expiration date. It was genuine. He looked at the other cards, a government travel card, a security clearance badge for the naval shipyard. Miller's face went pale, then red. He looked at the prisoner. "Chief Thorne?" "Yes, Sergeant." "You're active. Attached to Carrier Strike Group 2 Engineering Department." Miller stood up slowly. The air in the room seemed to vanish. He looked at Officer Vance with a gaze that could peel paint. "Vance," Miller said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Did you verify this ID? I looked at it. It looked fake. He was acting—" "Did you verify it?" Miller roared, slamming his hand on the desk. The entire booking room went silent. "You brought a United States Navy Chief Petty Officer into my precinct in cuffs for waiting for a sandwich, and you accused him of stolen valor." "Sarge," the manager said. "I don't give a damn what the manager said. You are a police officer. Your job is to investigate." Miller pointed a trembling finger at Thorne. "Uncuff him, now." Vance hesitated, confused by the sudden shift in power. "Sarge, he was trespassing. Uncuff him before I rip that badge off your chest myself," Miller shouted. Vance fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking. He unlocked the cuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists where deep red welts had formed. "Chief B." Sergeant Miller came around the desk, extending his hand. "I am mortified. I am former Army. I know what this means. Please accept my apology on behalf of this department." Thorne shook the hand firmly. "Thank you, Sergeant. I need to contact my command. And I need the name of this officer and the manager who called him." Miller nodded grimly. "You'll have everything. And, Chief, you're not under arrest. You never were." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By 2:00 p.m., the video from the restaurant had been uploaded to social media by the woman at the nearby table. It was titled, "Cop Arrests Navy Veteran for Waiting for Food." It had 10,000 views in the first hour. By 5 p.m., it had 1 million. The visual of a uniformed police officer screaming "Stolen Valor" at a stoic black man who was clearly complying struck a nerve across the nation. The Naval Command did not take the insult lightly. The base admiral contacted the chief of police directly. This wasn't just a civil rights violation. It was an insult to the armed forces. The Navy's JAG Corps began coordinating with Thorne's civilian legal team. The stolen valor accusation was the nail in the coffin for Vance's defense. It proved his bias. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had actively created a false narrative to justify his aggression. Reporters swarmed Sullivan's BBQ. Brad Gorski tried to hide in his office, but corporate headquarters was already on the line. The reviews on the restaurant's page tanked instantly. Racist manager, hates veterans, don't eat here. The brand was toxic. Gorski was fired the next morning via a phone call. The company issued a statement apologizing to Chief Thorne and announcing a massive donation to veteran charities, but the damage was done. The community boycotted the location, and it closed permanently 3 months later. Officer Vance was placed on administrative leave, but the video was too damning. The Bodycam footage released 3 days later confirmed everything Thorne had said. It showed Vance escalating, immediately refusing to look at the receipt, and mocking the military ID. The internal affairs investigation, under immense pressure from the mayor and the Navy, moved at record speed. Vance was found to have violated Civil Rights Departmental policy on de-escalation and conduct unbecoming an officer. The lawsuit filed by Chief Thorne was a masterclass in accountability. It named the city, the police department officer Vance, and the restaurant group. The charges included false arrest defamation for the stolen valor comment and civil rights violations. The city's attorneys watched the video once and advised a settlement. They knew a jury would destroy them. The idea of putting a decorated Navy chief on the stand to testify how a 29-year-old cop called him a liar was a legal suicide mission. The settlement was reached in 11 months, $4.8 million. It was one of the largest payouts in the city's history for a single arrest. But for Thorne, it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. As part of the settlement, he demanded a public apology from the chief of police to be read at a press conference. He also demanded that Officer Vance be decertified, meaning he could never work in law enforcement again. The city agreed. Derek Vance was fired and stripped of his certification. At 29, his career was over, a casualty of his own arrogance. On the day the settlement was finalized, Marcus Thorne stood on the steps of the courthouse. He wore his dress whites, his gold chief insignia gleaming in the sun, his ribbon rack displaying the history of his service. He looked every bit the hero Vance had claimed he wasn't. Reporters asked him how he felt. Thorne paused, looking out at the city he had sworn to protect, the same city that had tried to criminalize his existence.
"I spent 22 years defending the freedom of others," Thorne said, his voice steady. "I've been to war. I've been away from my family for months at a time. I did it because I believe in this country. But when I came home, I wasn't a chief to that officer. I wasn't a veteran. I was just a suspect. That is a betrayal that no settlement can fix. We have to be better. We have to stop seeing enemies in our neighbors." The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a truth that everyone knew but rarely spoke. Thorne didn't smile. He adjusted his cover, turned, and walked away, a man who had won the battle but was still fighting the war. This story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions.
How many veterans are treated this way when they aren't in uniform? How many people without the rank and resources of a Navy chief are sitting in jail right now because an officer refused to listen? Marcus Thorne had the discipline to survive the encounter and the credentials to prove his innocence. But what about those who don't? Justice was served in the courtroom, but the scar remains. It reminds us that respect shouldn't require a badge, a uniform, or a title. It should be the default for every human being. What would you have done if you witnessed this arrest? Do you think the punishment for the officer was severe enough? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in holding power accountable, subscribe to our channel. We will keep telling these stories until the system changes. Thank you for watching.